Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Holyrood Events virtual conference, Cloud Services in the Public Sector. Glad you've all got back to join us again, and I hope you've enjoyed it so far. We had a really interesting session this morning, the Scottish Government's latest thinking on plans for cloud, introducing a structured approach to support planning and procurement across the whole of the public sector in Scotland. We also heard from AWS on the industrial and business drivers and how the Scottish public sector is harnessing those business values, not just the technology opportunity. So I'm your chair for this session. My job is to make sure we finish as close as we can to time. But I want to remind you that you do have a digital handbook. Contents will give you details about the virtual platform, which I hope is self-explanatory now, but should you need any guidance, the agenda, speaker biographies, session themes, and indeed our sponsor profiles. Please do use Twitter if you're a Twitter user. The hashtag is #HolyroodConnect, that's one word. And I do want to thank once again our session sponsor. It's Cirrus HQ for this session. Without the sponsors, it wouldn't be possible to run this sort of event. And do take time to visit the Sponsors Hub, which you can access from the conference lobby. It's also a networking lounge. And of course, we want to make this as interactive as possible. So do keep your questions coming. You will see a box for adding questions on the bottom right hand of your screen. And we'll either be answering those questions as we go through, by writing you a response, or we'll pick up on them in the panel session at the end of this this stream. So this afternoon, this closing session, we're going to hear about the practical delivery challenges in a cloud project, dealing with legacy constraints in particular. It's a real case study from the University of Oxford with Cirrus HQ, and I've got 4 excellent speakers and panelists for this session. Anjanesh Babu, Systems Architect, Network Manager in the Gardens and Museums IT team for the University of Oxford. Marcus Cheetham, Project Manager for the University of Oxford. Mahil Vanan, Technical Lead for Cirrus HQ. And Peter Jackson, who will be kicking off, Business Architect for Cirrus HQ. They're going to present, and then we're going to move into a panel session, which Peter will look after for you. But please do ask your questions of the panel as we go through, anything you'd like to ask. In fact, make it as difficult as you possibly can for them, because I'm not going to be answering them, they are. So please come up with your questions and I'll try and do the same. So without more ado from me, I'd like to hand over to Peter Jackson, Business Architect from Cirrus HQ. Thank you.
Thank you, Joss. Welcome all. I'm just going to share my screen. So hi and welcome. I really hope you enjoyed this morning's session, in particular the chickens and the really insightful conversations and fantastic stuff that is coming out of the Scottish Government at the moment. For this afternoon's session, we're with the University of Oxford, and we are focusing on the museums and their wonderful collections, and how they've updated their online collections to cloud, utilizing a cloud-first approach in their project. And hopefully through the session, you'll see some of the insights, some of the learnings, and some of the experiences we've gained throughout. So if I click the right button, let's just introduce ourselves. So start with Marcus.
Hi, so my name is Marcus Cheetham, and I'm a project manager at University of Oxford in the IT Services Department. But although I'm in IT Services, I actually spend most of my, well, all of my time really working for GLAM, which is Gardens, Libraries and Museums. So we have a digital transformation program for the whole of GLAM, although my focus is really for the museums and their collection systems. So next person.
Oh, hello. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I was waiting for Pete to step in. Sorry about that. I'm Anjanesh. I work as a systems architect and network manager at Gardens and Museums. As Marcus mentioned, we are part of Gardens, Libraries and Museums. I'm primarily responsible for infrastructure and architecture across the units. I'm also the principal lead consulting architect across the program.
Thank you, Anjanesh. So I'm Pete Jackson. I'm business architect at Cirrus HQ. I have been in education and technology in education my entire working career. I've been developing and deploying solutions on cloud since 2010. And in my previous role, I helped to create and own the Cloud Center of Excellence for the company I was working with. And to be honest, I am just an absolute advocate and very passionate about cloud. Mahel.
Hey, good afternoon all. I'm the technical lead at Cirrus HQ. I've been a SysOps engineer and solutions architect specializing in AWS for nearly 10 years now. I do hold both the SA Pro and the DevOps Pro certifications that Amazon gives, and also the 3 associate certifications. I do consider myself to be a cloud first and a cloud native evangelist, and also a very keen DevOps advocate. And I do consult on lots of technical and solutions architecture for most of our customers, and I was the lead infrastructure engineer for the Collections Online project.
Thank you, Mahel. So, brief background about both of us. So we're Cirrus HQ. We were founded in 2011 and we are headquartered in Livingston, Scotland. We also have offices in Oxford and London as well. We are an AWS Advanced Partner and we specialize in multiple areas, but in particular, we help with migrations, architecture, design, deployment, maintenance and support of your workloads in the cloud. So just a few bits. We also work alongside AWS very closely, and there's a number of programs that we offer through Amazon. First of which is a well-architected program. This is a ability to you to review your production workloads and understand how well it performs against a set number of criteria. And then we help mitigate those risks and work with you for your plans going forwards out from those reviews. We also then have a guided onboarding program, which is specifically aimed at the education sector and to give proof of concepts for particular workloads that education might have, whether it be their learning management systems or delivering apps via AppStream, particularly pertinent in today's society where we need to be able to uncouple the licenses from our devices to be able to push out those apps virtually. And then finally, we also have immersion days. Because AWS is such a broad area and it's such a wonderful set of services, immersion days help you just kind of cut through that and just kind of target those some really interesting key areas, whether it be serverless or anything else that's kind of fun or interesting in there, to be able to kind of work through labs and sessions with you to kind of understand and learn more about those particular areas. So that's Cirrus HQ. Over to the university.
Right, so as I mentioned, we have a program of digital change for GLAM. So what is GLAM? GLAM consists of the 4 museums, the Oxford University Museum of Natural History, the History of Science Museum, the Ashmolean and the Pitt Rivers Museum, and also the Oxford Botanic Garden and Arboretum and the Bodleian Libraries. So all of those institutions are in scope for the larger program. Although for the purposes of what we're talking about today, and also the focus of my work, it's really just the museums. Next slide, please.
Perfect. Yep, thanks. And my personal favourite is the Pitt Rivers, just so everybody's aware of that. So In terms of the structure of today, we've kind of gone over it, so I'll just go really briefly. We're just going to go through a deep dive to give context, and then again, as Josh said, please submit your questions throughout, because we have a panel session afterwards planned where we'll go through some of the deep dive in certain areas, but we'd love to, as Josh said, ask the most difficult and complex questions you can, because I'd love to see the team answer them as well as Josh. So with that said, some background. So back to you, Marcus.
Right. Okay. So so the focus of what we're talking about today is collections online, but I wanted to give you a little bit of context how it fits in to everything else. So the projects I'm involved with are all about bringing the university's digital systems up to a suitable standard. So these include collections management systems. So if you see on the far left, the column there, it says CMS. So most people would normally associate with CMS with content management system. In our case, it's a collections management system. And DANS, digital asset management system, for the management of images and other media, and collections online, which is all about delivering digital collections information to the web. And just to explain a little bit more about the CMS side, so obviously everybody knows that museums have collections, they have physical collections. So the CMS is all about the digital records for all of these and all the associated metadata, which might include loans information, when it was acquired, descriptions, and so on and so forth. So these two systems, CMS and DANS, are kind of crucial for the operation of the museums. And the collections online is obviously crucial for getting information out there to the rest of the world. So I separated this out into 4 columns to indicate the time periods. So the first column on the left is the current state, not so current anymore, August 2019. So this is kind of our starting point. So grey boxes indicate that the museums had a legacy system. Light green indicates that they had a good system and it's not going to change. White indicates they didn't have anything at all. So you can see that on the CMS side, the Museum of Natural History and History of Science, they had a system called Axial EMU that they were happy with and wasn't going to change, whereas the other 2 museums had legacy systems that needed to evolve. Nobody had anything for digital asset management. It's all a combination of network drives and other kinds of things. And in terms of collections online, they all had a web presence. They had collections online, but not very good ones. They either weren't very good at presenting all the information, or they were very poorly integrated with their other systems. So as we move forwards through the different time periods, you notice the boxes change color. So a light blue indicates we've partially implemented it. So, and that would normally mean that we've got the system live, but we haven't fully configured or fully migrated all the content. And then it goes darker blue, or bluey green, and that indicates it's fully implemented, we've migrated all the content, and people are using it in the museums. It's fully operational, basically. So that's the end state. We're going to end up with all of these things changed. You might notice in the first tranche, spring of this year, we had only 1 dark blue, and that's a Museum of Natural History for collections online. So that's what we're going to be focusing on in this talk today. Oh, and one other thing, sorry, I was going to say that some of them have red outlines, which indicates they haven't been properly funded yet. Sorry, Peter, if you want to go to the next slide. So how does this all fit together when it's done? So this is kind of an end state diagram here. At the bottom, we have the 4 museums, Natural History, History of Science, Ashmolean and Pitt Rivers, and their respective systems. So Natural History, they have their CMS system EMU, which I already mentioned. We don't have a DANS yet in this diagram because we're hoping that they're going to come on board with this, but they're not in the plan right now. History of Science, they're also using EMU, but they're going to adopt the new DANS, which is Montala Resource Space. And then for the Ashmolean and Pitt Rivers, they're both adopting new systems, for the dams, Montala Resource Space, and for the CMS, ZECCON Museum Plus. So that's kind of where they'll be at the end of this piece of work. Although, like I mentioned, we are hoping that natural history will also get to dams too. So those will be their sort of like business systems that they'll use for managing all their assets and digital collections data. Now, what we have built for collections online is kind of above that. So we've got this AWS layer where all the data gets exported from the CMSs and is indexed using Elasticsearch, using AWS infrastructure and all the other tools, bells and whistles, which we'll be talking about as we move forwards. So that data gets there and is indexed and then is made available to the wider world via an embedded JavaScript app, which is embedded in their respective websites. And so within this JavaScript app, you can search the data, you can browse the data, you can see images, you can do various things. So next slide, Peter. Okay, so what were our business requirements for this collections online system? Firstly, it needs to be easy to publish new content. We want to put the power to decide what content to publish and when to publish into the hands of the users of the systems. And actually, unfortunately, they're kind of legacy systems, not like that at all. It can be quite a torturous process to publish content to the web. So they should be able to decide what should be published, click a button, and it's either published real time or it's scheduled overnight or whatever we decide based on the business needs. We also need a system that scales to demand. So we're starting with one museum. We're going to move on to the other four. We also don't really know how demand will work out. I think what you often find with the museums is they have a new exhibition or something like that, and demand can skyrocket unexpectedly. So we want a system that can handle all of that. And we need a solution that can grow and be extensible. So as you would have seen in the former slide, our rollout is taking place over a number of years. We've started with Museum of Natural History. We're going to move on to the other museums. Once they're in place, it's very likely we'll be building on new functionality as we move forward. So we need an architecture that can be extended. We don't want to be redeveloping things. We want a framework that is suitable for enhancing and enhancing. And it needs to be integrated. So in the previous slide where I showed you how these systems fit together, it kind of indicates how these systems do need to talk to each other. So the CMSs will talk to the dams, and the CMS itself needs to export data to our AWS middle layer and then onto the web application, which is integrated with the museum's regular websites. And our developers, we have a development team in-house, but they are software developers, and we want to empower them to do what they do best, which is developing software. And rather than having to wait for procuring infrastructure and so on and so forth, they need to be able to do what they need to do to be able to sort of create new code, move that into an environment, view it, and then continue to iterate. So we wanted them to have all that power to develop their software and not be dependent on various other steps. Now, support model, which is probably one of the more complex things that we had to look at. So I'm sure everybody on this call is familiar with IT projects that delivered something that wasn't particularly supported. So we didn't want to do that. We wanted to make sure we've got a sustainable, supported solution moving forwards. So we kind of came up with a support model that involves business stakeholders at the museums, our infrastructure partner, Cirrus HQ, the software team, and a kind of triaging process that would involve Gardens and Museums IT, the IT group that support the museums. And disaster recovery, if for any reason something was compromised in our solution, we want to be able to redeploy it, take it down, redeploy it in a matter of moments. So this is what we have. We haven't experienced this yet, but if something were to happen, if the web application was hacked or something like that, we will be able to take it down and redeploy, either via redeploying the code via the pipeline or reverting to a snapshot of what we have. And last but certainly not least, we wanted an affordable solution. The museums, as I'm sure you can imagine, they're always under pressure, budgetary speaking, and so we needed a to be affordable to develop the solution, but it needs to be affordable on an ongoing basis.
Perfect. Shall I hand over control of the screens to you now, Marcus, to give a demo?
Thanks very much. Okay, so now I'm going to actually give you a taste of what we have developed. So this is the website for the Museum of Natural History. There's a bit of this big yellow box at the top is about the kind of various COVID issues. So it does kind of change the layout a little bit, but you should nevertheless be able to see everything. So, so if you go to the Oxford Museum of Natural History website and go to the Collections tab at the top, and then select Collections Online, that will take you to the system we've developed. Oh, my apologies. The phone is just going, so that should stop in a moment. Ah, thankfully that stopped. Right. Okay, so we're now on the Collections Online section of the website. Now what you're seeing, the top part of it is the actual website, which is created using our in-house web publishing system. Now below the title, Collections Online, everything then is our JavaScript application. So all of this is now dynamic data, which is either kind of embedded in the JavaScript application or it's being derived from our index content in AWS. So there's an indication of how many digital records we have in the system, a search box. There is an advanced search, but I'll only show you the standard search today. Then as you move forwards, we have various kind of content items which are kind of featured. So you can go straight to collections information, which is, we've thought is particularly interesting. Then there are kind of shortcuts to the collections areas. So paleontology or entomology. Now these take you to kind of the standard interface, but it's basically a pre-filtered area for paleontology or the other categories. And then there are various links back to content in the website. And then down below, let me just refresh this so we can see that, is an object gallery which contains the more interesting, sort of more visual pieces. So let me just, sorry, the presentation does take a certain amount of bandwidth, so it's a little slower than it would be normally. Okay, so here's our object gallery. So this is kind of a subset of the digital collections that we determined is a bit more visual. It tends to have nicer images, and it's randomized each time you go to the website, so you see different things each time. So I could click on one of those, but what I'm going to do is actually do a search, and in a moment Peter is going to step you through what happens in the back end when the user does a search. So I'm going to use the term elephant and then click to search. Okay, so what's happened is the application has queried the data and it's come up with a load of records. So you can see all of these listed below. And then on the left-hand side, there are all these category areas that can be used to filter it. So if you wanted to see elephant records within using the zoology classification, you could click zoology or paleontology and so on and so forth. You can also filter by which records have images or which ones don't. So, so natural history, they have an enormous number of records, but unfortunately it's only a much smaller subset that have images. And so you can see in this case, it's only one that has an image. So I'm just going to select that, and that actually filters down to the record that I wanted to show you. So I'm going to click on this. Right, and that brings up this particular record, the turquoise Chinese carving of an elephant mounted on wooden base. So we have an image for that, and actually we have quite a few images. Now you can either just click on the thumbnails to view those, or you can click on the image and it will open the lightbox, and you can click next or back to look at the different views of this particular object. And there's various captions below as you go forwards. You can also download the image or go full screen or zoom in. I won't show you that right now. I'll just come out of that. And then what you will typically find for each object, you'll have, in many cases, a lot of metadata. This is a bit more slimline in terms of the metadata compared to some of them, but you know, the collection area, sub-collection, and so on and so forth. Some of these links are actually live links that will take you to that category area. And then down below we have related items. So these are items which a mixture of kind of the indexing process and certain curatorial aspects that determine what items are related in one way or another to this record. So you can click on those as well and actually ask for more related items. So that's kind of an example. There is more to it, but we only have so much time, so I'm just going to leave it there. And I'm going to stop sharing this website and hand back to Peter.
Thank you, Marcus. I hope the phone call was interesting.
Fortunately, I didn't.
Yes. So, as Marcus alluded, I thought it'd be really nice to show you what happens behind the scenes of the interactions that you've just seen. So, as Marcus showed you, he did a simple search for elephants, and what happens then is that generates something called an API call to our Amazon Web Service solution. Now, I'm not going to show you all the security solutions here, but I did want to highlight that despite the collections being free and freely available, we did just want to ensure that there was security throughout and that nobody could maliciously attack, brute force their way in, and aspects like that. So I'm demonstrating a WAF for you there. After that, the API comes to a gateway. This is a really important component of this particular solution. It is very extensible in what it delivers for the university, and it means that actually it's future-proofed, because not in the future, the API call might come from something further than Mosaic's websites. It gives them the options, hence future-proofing. After that, this is where the deep dive gets fun, so stick with me. This is where it hits something called a Lambda function, which is serverless service from Amazon. So to try and describe this really briefly is we do not have to worry about the server that the code is being put on. We do not have to worry about the operating system and aspects like that. We are just placing their code onto a function and it will run. It's available and it will run. And the best thing about this is that they only pay for the time that statement is being, the code is being run itself. So that is real cost saving for them then, and it includes availability and all those fantastic aspects like that. So hopefully I haven't lost you too much there. And the development team really cottoned on to this as a concept, and they split up their code accordingly to this. So that simple search is kept inside one function, and that function is then calling through a query the database. And as you'd have it, Amazon have a purpose-built search database that is highly available, clustered database, to be able to retrieve that data as quickly as possible, so then it comes back to the website along with any assets associated to it to present what we have just seen in terms of the collections online. And that round robin into Amazon and back out again took a whole 0.17 seconds. So that is just one flavor of one aspect of the objectives that we helped deliver for the university. We also helped with provisioning, the continuous deployments, the ingestion of data from their collection management systems, and support as well. So that's just going to conclude the brief overview for context for everyone. And now, if we go back off, if I can click the right button, we'll take ourselves off the share presenting mode, and we'll go into the panel session to discover more about the solution and the lessons learned. So to start it off, I thought, so first off, I thought, given the significance, the key drivers of this year's event, it'd be great to understand from the University of Oxford your thoughts and plans around Cloud First, both at the departmental level and the impact to the overall university. So Anjanesh, as our cloud evangelist, could you give us your thoughts on this?
Good. Thank you, Pete. I must confess, I wasn't a cloud evangelist, so up to 2008, 2010, I was a cloud skeptic, wasn't sure and what's going on with the cloud. But then progressively, during our infrastructure project as part of the GLAM digital program, we made the decision to look at what is the backup options and where do we go. And that was the first step in terms of going with a hybrid solution. And that started the cloud first approach. So that meant that 2017, we went from on-premise storage, hybrid, cloud first, and we were at a maturity point where we could consider things like serverless and Lambda. And when Marcus's project came along, we were much more in a position to look at Amazon and cloud as an opportunity. In the last 6 months, it's been cloud only, whether it's vendor hosted cloud, whether it's our infrastructure, it's now just cloud only. There's nothing else. So moving from the past where it has been a lot of rehost, refactor, re-architect, rebuilds, the vision is not to do any more re's. We are just looking at native, cloud native application, cloud, it's the cloud based applications that we would only look at from now on. So that's the kind of breadth of our journey and sort of looking forward as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Anjanesh. And considering I've loved you the last couple of years, I found it amazing that you were once a cloud skeptic. Considering your absolute passion that you have for cloud, it just kind of highlights through the journey that you've had at the university. So going on from that, the Collections Online project span multiple departments at the university and with third parties, namely ourselves, Cirrus HQ. Given the significance of this, at the time, pilot project that was wrapped into this major set of overall transformational changes, why did you utilize AWS and the cloud-first approach, and how did it help you realize your goals? Marcus, given your role as project manager, could I get your insights on this?
Sure. Yeah, so when we kind of began this whole process, we were procuring systems for the other parts of the work, and we thought there's going to be some kind of out-of-the-box system that we could use for Collections Online. It turns out there wasn't, so none of the suppliers did anything. Well, there were a few areas that were slightly like it, but there was nothing really like what we wanted to do. So we realized that we would need to develop it ourselves. Fortunately, we have a development team in-house, and they're experienced in web technologies. But we also realize there's quite an interplay of content and the application itself, and we weren't quite sure what we wanted to do. There wasn't really a vision from the stakeholders, as it were. So we wanted to get something up and running quickly that we could actually experiment with and sort of confirm that we're on the right lines. And so we kind of moved into a proof of concept, then a pilot. So it's imperative that we had something that was quick to do, rather than having to provision infrastructure in a very traditional way. So cloud seems exactly the way to go, and an AWS specifically. We did look to an extent at other areas, but we had a little bit more knowledge in-house of AWS, partly through Anjanesh's work. So not only did we want to get something in place quite quickly, we wanted to then be able to iterate and iterate and iterate. So all of that sort of ticked a box for working with AWS. As kind of mentioned previously, cost is also a factor, particularly when putting a proof of concept together. We really didn't want to spend very much because we didn't know for sure this is going to work. So you can do a lot in a very sort of non-production sense. So that worked out quite well to get things in place, to just trial it out. The other aspect, which I think Peter already mentioned, is you tend to only pay for what you use. So actually, when you're in development mode and you're not using very much, again, it's quite cheap, and you only really see those costs when you move to production. So all of those aspects came together, and it kind of really made it, it was really a no-brainer, to be honest, that we would go cloud first, and and AWS was, as is very functional, where there's a certain amount of knowledge in house, and Anjanesh had already worked with Cirrus HQ, so they were on hand to give us some advice.
Perfect. Thank you for highlighting those benefits. Cirrus HQ are an advanced AWS partner, and we're affiliated to a number of programs I alluded to earlier. Mahil, could you talk through the principles of well-architected framework and how you aligned the outputs of the program to ensure the collections online solution benefited?
Thanks, Pete. Just to give everybody an introduction on what well-architected is, very, very briefly, it is a framework that was developed by AWS to help architects to build and deploy secure, high-performing, resilient, and efficient infrastructure and platforms for the application and workloads. It helps give people a consistent approach in addressing the same, right? It is based on like 5 foundational pillars on which any application or workload is built upon, like security, resilience, performance efficiency, operational excellence, and the most important of all for a lot of people, cost ops. And the key principles that surround the framework involve like allowing for evolutionary architecture and experimentation during the life cycle of the project, and continuous improvement cycles, so that you're not just stuck to one viewpoint, right? And down the line it becomes legacy. We don't want that. And it also kind of stresses upon knowledge sharing and sharing of the processes and policies around knowledge sharing across the different teams and that's involved in any workload maintenance and development. Just to call back on these principles and to Marcus's presentation about the requirements and objectives for what the Collections Online project involved, Marcus mentioned things like scales. He wanted it to scale to demand, right? So that is covered under the performance pillar. We kind of leverage serverless where possible, which means the scaling becomes automatic. It scales and it becomes future-proof. It's extensible. Like Pete was saying, we use Lambda as an API gateway that automatically scale to demand. We don't need to worry about provisioning infrastructure behind the scenes. Marcus was then talking about how they wanted streamlined development and their requirement for a solid support model. Which is done on our operational excellence pillar, which then equates to the fully CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development code pipelines, which is being done with AWS Code Pipeline. We leverage GitOps, which is like a new term now. It is using DevOps, but with Git behind the scenes, and you push to Git, and as soon as you push to the version control, that is GitHub, it automatically goes and flows into production. And the whole process, I think, takes like 5 minutes now after we've done improvements and stuff. So that is a really good kind of an plus point for this. We were talking about, Marcus was then talking about affordability, which is equals to the cost ops pillar. We do regular cost optimization reviews, and we've done like an initial cost modeling for the whole workload as such. Disaster recovery plans is the reliability pillar, infrastructure as code, and custom made backup policies, backup kind of scripts and stuff, which kind of take snapshots and ensure the restoration is done under the RTOs and RPOs that is expected of the workload. From the last time we did a restoration, it takes like around 35-40 minutes to get the whole system back up and running from scratch. So it's as quick as that. So that's how all these well-architected principles kind of support these things. One thing you probably might have noticed, I didn't talk about security. We don't usually treat security as separate to any development. It is task zero. It is integrated to each and every part of the application that is being built, right? So if we don't treat it as like once everything is built, let's do a security review kind of thing. Security reviews and scannings are done on each and every step, right from the get-go, right from while you're writing code. We have tools like CFNAG, which kind of scans the CloudFormation code, the infrastructure as code, as we write it, and tells us if there's any issues. We kind of have testing steps inside the CI/CD pipelines and that ensure end-to-end scanning, and that is how we've encapsulated and all the requirements, as the business of Collections Online wanted, was delivered with the project that CirrusHQ kind of gave them. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Mahil. You can definitely tell your passion coming out in there. Anjanesh, you've worked with multiple partners. Why was it important to work with a partner and a key partner on this project?
So we've got multiple partners, and what I look for in a cloud partner, especially in this scale, there are a lot of things that we can do, but we can't do at pace. We don't have a production system that we can get into, and it slows us down if we're doing it on our own. Plus having a robust support service, because our value lies in engaging with the users, trying to understand the needs, stated needs and unstated needs. And CirrusHQ, working with CirrusHQ has been a massive change for the better. So what I look for in a partner, more than the cost to a certain extent, is the cultural fit. And I try to treat all partners as members of our team. So the opportunity to work together, to learn together, is most important for me. And as with CirrusHQ on the project, we set a new precedent where we have technology workshops, step-throughs of what's been developed, and say this is how it's been developed. It's like a light touch training. So we use partners like CirrusHQ not only to develop the solution, not only to use expertise, but to share knowledge between us. So we treat each other as members of the same team, and it's paid off very well, because we have learned lots of things from Cirrus, and it's been a very formative experience, and we're still learning the things that we're still learning, and things like proactiveness, quick answers. May not be right, but if you're hesitant, but don't come back to me like 2 weeks later saying, hey, we're still working on this. And that doesn't happen at CirrusHQ. We get along very well in terms of the turnaround, the budgetary aspects. I think the cultural fit is most important on how we can work together, and that was decisive.
Thank you, Anjanesh. That's very kind of you as well. It's almost like I drip fed you that question. So, Marcus, given you have had to deliver this project, you had an in-house development team as well as other key resources. What approach was utilized to take advantage of the skills that you had in terms of adoption of the cloud, and what benefits and challenges do you face in delivering the project?
Okay. So as I mentioned and Peter mentioned again, we do have a software team in-house, and they are quite used to working using agile development techniques. So that's kind of that was our preferred method, and it fitted this quite well in that we wanted to sort of iterate the solution moving forwards. And as we did this iteration, we would learn more and more. So actually, it was quite. So that works well. One of the things we did face, however, was that there was a gap in knowledge. So although some of the team had some experience in AWS, they didn't have a lot. So they knew a lot about software development, not so much about the AWS infrastructure. So by sort of partnering and learning as we went, we gradually sort of embedded that knowledge within the software team around AWS. And we did have sessions on knowledge transfer as well. So there are a lot of kind of acronyms that if you're not used to it, you wouldn't necessarily know. When you find out what it is, it's like, oh yeah, okay, so that's like this. And I have kind of experienced that before, but I didn't know it was called that in AWS. So all of that knowledge transfer was really important. As mentioned previously, just reducing the dependencies for the software team to be able to develop their code and deploy, again, was really instrumental, because the last thing you want is them to develop the code but not really be able to test it properly in an actual environment. And then obviously that lent itself to moving to the production environment. So I think we found that, so I think broadly speaking, it all worked together quite well. The communication, I think, was absolutely key, and we were, so as Peter said when introducing this question, we had many different people. So we've got stakeholders at the museum, we've got Gardens and Museums IT, we've got Cirrus HQ, we've got the software team, and then various other people seem to come in the mix as well. So keeping that communication working was a challenge, and absolutely instrumental in getting this working. So I think the more we move forwards, the more we acted as if we were one team, which I think would be the thing for any project like that. That's, I think, the key learning, that you should be one team, everyone's plans together, and you do your kind of refinement of requirements together. So I think that's probably all I would say on that.
Perfect. Thank you, Marcus. So let's take it slightly wider. So Anjanesh, within the GLAM division, you're clearly the evangelist of cloud and the capabilities and opportunities it presents. How do you utilize AWS, and I know you use Azure too, for building out proof of concepts and introduce them back to key members of your department?
So there's an idea pipeline and a production pipeline. They combine together in an informal innovation pipeline. These are my terms. So we look at stated needs or unstated needs. We are very well connected to the users, and we've got a fantastic service desk team led by my colleague Carl Parker, and we in turn are led by head of IT Haas. So we are very well engaged with the user. We find the gaps. So, for example, the most recent example would be we looked at an Apple script which is not being documented, and it's running, but it's only Apple. So, and I looked at it, it's like, hey, can we make this more cross-platform? And I knew enough that this is possible with Lambda, but I didn't want to go into solution mode. That's where things come up. So these things, when you can sound it out to Cirrus HQ, we have a full proof of concept in literally 3 days, if I'm right, Pete. So we kind of explore the bits with Amazon, and we've got a very good working relationship with Amazon accounts and with the solution architects within Cirrus HQ as well. We test out the idea, and it's not always successful in terms of, oh, let's do it, and we've gone there. But the best thing is we can park the idea and keep it in what I call a bag of tricks. So perhaps something comes up in the future, we can build a modular base. And that's what it's good. We can test it out. Like Marcus mentioned, you pay for what you use, and it's quantifiable. I think the holistic support across Amazon, Cirrus HQ, internal teams works very well together. And we've got a fair deal of confidence in how we do this.
Thank you, Anjanesh. Mohil, from a partner viewpoint, how do we help with POCs?
Yeah, as an advanced partner, right? We kind of keep up to date with all the new technologies and services Amazon releases, and it is like, as Anjanesh said, fail fast. Do it do it in a very short period of time, create a POC to understand the positives and the negatives of any service. The limitations. I don't like the word negatives. It's the limitations, and the limitations can always be removed as days go along, right? So that is a very key factor in most of the technology choices that we kind of tell our customers, and we ensure our advice is the best, because we kind of, as soon as Amazon does a new service release or anything like that, we do a POC internally. We review that service. We make sure we understand completely all the positives and the limitations of that service, and keep up to date when those limitations are being removed. Sometimes Amazon will come up with a minimum viable product with a certain known limitations, but as days go along, they've released new features for the same service and remove those limitations. And as partners, we kind of keep up to date and keep making sure we retest these assumptions. It's a continual improvement cycle, as I mentioned before, going with the same well-architected principles. We continually keep up to date and improve upon our solutions. That's how.
Thank you. So the collections have been online for many months now, almost a year. How has support changed the University of Oxford as a result of the project? Marcus, could you give us an update on the challenges you faced? And then Anjanesh, I wonder if you could update us on how business as usual is performing.
Okay, yeah, so I think I mentioned before, so getting the support model in place was a bit of a challenge because there's many different parties involved, and there's not always a kind of clear model, both financial or otherwise, as to how a system that is somewhat distributed like this can be supported moving forwards. So we did a lot of work sort of analysing who does what, got that in place. Since the system went live, the kind of things that we've had, it's mostly been just content updates. So Natural History continue to publish new information. So there might be new images, there might be new areas of the collection that are become available, and so on and so forth. So those things have been published out and then either tested in staging and then moved over to production. And I think it's worked well so far. So there were the kind of issues that we faced were perhaps mismatches between the data records that maybe indicated there was an image in, but there wasn't really an image. And so we had those kind of things that were derived from the data in the first place. But those all got resolved quite quickly within the kind of various parties involved. Otherwise, I think we haven't had any real issues, which is obviously a good thing. And so far so good. I think the live system is working well.
So just to follow up on that, the BOE part, the BAU part, as far as users are concerned, there's been no change, which is brilliant. No one's actually said anything. No one actually comes back and says brilliant solution. It's not, because it's just everything's abstracted. They don't need to worry about what's going on in the background. And that's the best part. The whole complexity, the whole mechanics are all abstracted behind the platform. Escalation points are very clear defined, and it's made our life so much easier. We know exactly whom to contact. As an additional bonus, SiriusHQ also manage the third-party vendor relationship. So we've got the EMU as an application platform. If there's an issue, they can also get in touch with Axial, who support EMU. They can get in touch with us. So we've got this three-way kind of agreement or kind of informal arrangement, which we can escalate as required. So that's really, really helps. So that feeds into, like, we treat our partners like members of a team. I would expect a member of my team to pick these up, and that's what SiriusHQ is doing at the moment.
Isa, Joss here. We're obviously beginning to move towards the end of the session, and I wondered if I could chip in with a couple of questions of my own. So really exciting actually to see what you've achieved in what is a relatively short space of time. I know one of the challenges though for some of the attendees at the conference will be the balance between, do I develop something specific or do I just buy an off-the-shelf, use a public cloud type of solution? You've obviously gone down the road of developing directly, presumably because you've got a pretty niche and specialist requirement, as you described earlier on, and this may be for Marcus actually, but how do you think how should organizations in the public sector balance between developing your own and trying to perhaps compromise and buy off the shelf? How do you balance that issue?
Yeah, so that's a big question, of course, and it's certainly something that we were dealing with. So the whole process began with a procurement exercise, and we were looking primarily at collections management systems, digital asset management systems, and collections online. And actually, we even had another one in the mix as well, a kind of picture library for commercial image sales as well. So we began that journey. We kind of did a lot of research on what was out there and what suppliers were available. So I think it became quite clear quite quickly that for dams, there's lots of suppliers. And it's quite clear that we would be able to find something. Collections management systems, it is quite niche, but there's still quite a few. So, and they are very embedded in the heritage industry based upon the kind of nature of collections and the systems to provide that. So we really discovered that, our plan, we thought there would be systems and there were, so it's fine. And Picture Library 2, we found that there are systems, but it became difficult to decide how that would integrate with the other things. So we spun it off. Collections Online, I think it's fair to say our first choice would have been an out-of-the-box system if there had been one. So in this case, the decision was made for us. But had there been something that was fairly good, then but not quite good enough, then I think we would have had more of a decision-making path. But in this case, there just wasn't anything really out there at all. So in that space, there's a lot of web development companies out there. So there's a lot of those who will build you something bespoke, or they will adapt an existing content management system, that kind of thing. But none of it really fitted the bill at all. So yeah, so the decision was made for us. Having said that, though, it was a leap of faith because it was something quite new, and that's why we wanted to do that pilot and just prove that what we're doing, it is a sensible move. Yeah.
And presumably, Marcus, one of the key factors is to make sure, and I think you covered this earlier on, and Peter mentioned this, that you've got some commonality around the standards and the processes and so on, so that the problems with future integration and support are minimized.
Yeah, so I mean that was a key requirement to make sure there's interoperability in all of these systems. So that was, day one, we knew we needed that.
So, Peter, unless there are further questions, we're sort of moving towards the end of our session now. So I was going to do a short wrap up for our attendees, unless there's anything you wanted to say to close off the panel session.
Thank you, Joss. Just to quickly say thank you, everybody, for staying with us and listening. We will be online afterwards asking any further questions. And if you would like to know more about Cirrus HQ, then please do contact us either via myself, peter.jackson@cirrushq.com, or via the wonderful world of Google. So, but back over to you, Joss.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to all our speakers. If we were in a live venue, we'd all be clapping our hands now to show our appreciation. But I do appreciate it. So, Anjanesh, Marcus, Mehul, and Peter, thank you all very much for that. I have to say, I do love seeing a technology presentation which is bringing the world to life. And one of the things I'm going to do this evening is to go on and look at some of those collections, because I have to say I think it looks absolutely brilliant what you've achieved. And you know, a practical demo like that wouldn't really be possible without the use of cloud. You know, the point about bringing a collection to life is for education, for everybody's enjoyment, and given COVID-19, the practical application of cloud to overcome some of the problems that people have with isolation, let alone the business benefits that it's bringing our public service organizations, is enough to justify the sort of example that you've given us today. So once again, thank you very much to our speakers and also to our sponsors, both AWS and particularly Cirrus HQ for the work that they've been doing to support the conference and this particular project. Thank you also to Holyrood for facilitating the whole conference. As you heard, the on-demand sessions, including 2 case study presentations on cloud transition programs, will be available after this session. And we're going to be starting again with a filled day tomorrow at 10 a.m., looking particularly at how we embed resilience into practical cloud solutions for Scotland's public services, and ensuring cloud can be used to drive innovation, service improvement, and interestingly, revenue generation. So I do hope that you will be able to join us then. Just to remind everybody, there are some evaluation forms that are going to come through, and filling those out will give you immediate access to the session recordings and the slides. So for those of you who weren't able to take all the notes, you can get it that way. Suffice then from me to say thank you very much for joining us today. I do hope you will be joining us tomorrow, and I look forward to seeing you then. Don't forget that there's a lot of material available on the website. You will find it on the program that's associated with this event, and do make the most of it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you all.
Thank you.